Hi everyone, my name is David. Welcome to another tier list video. In this one, we're going to be focusing on used exotic and sports cars in the $100,000 to $150,000 price range. We had great feedback on our last one of cars in the $150,000 to $300,000 range, so we're going to look to up the production quality a little bit, continue providing our insights on these vehicles, and expand upon that a little bit in the $100,000 to $150,000 range. Our overall background is in automotive. I'm the founder and CEO here at Motorenn. We deal in buying, selling, and consigning used luxury and exotic cars. So if you like our content and want to check us out, take a look. But that puts us in a very unique position to have a great insight into all of these vehicles from a perspective of, one, I've been in pretty much all of these vehicles myself. And then two, we get to see the customer feedback and how the market responds to these vehicles. So I just want to share some of that insight with you on this. In terms of how the tier list is structured, we're going to go from S to A, B, C, D, and then niche. I do want to caveat, this is all my opinion and my feedback on it, and it may not reflect your experience, but take this for what it's worth. We do like to share what we have seen. And every car is great in its own terms. So the subjectivity rating of this, even the cars that are in D tier are still great cars, maybe not cars of my taste in particular. And modern cars are just so good across the board, you really can't even compare a D-list car in my list versus an S tier car from 30 years ago. They're just gonna be so much better in terms of all the engineering and performance that you're getting. So for what it's worth, that's how we grade it. The way I think about it is S tier is a car that is holding great value, may appreciate, is a great driver, is very enjoyable. It's a car that if you find a good one, turn your brain off, go ahead and get it and enjoy it. A tier is still a top-notch car, high quality, great value. You're gonna have a lot of fun driving that vehicle. B tier is the type of car that is still very good. If it fits your taste, I wouldn't have any regrets if you find, again, a good condition one at the right price. C tier, there may be some opportunities elsewhere. There may be some other cars that maybe do what it does a little bit better, but again, if it's that flavor that really hits you right, then enjoy it. It's your life, it's your car. D tier, these are cars that, look, there are a couple of flaws in that vehicle, whether from a value standpoint or maybe just from the dynamic standpoint that I at least disagree with. Again, you may have a different opinion of that, but it wouldn't be a car that I wouldn't necessarily buy, but I could see how, again, every modern car, there is a reason for it existing and a person who may very much so enjoy it. And the niche tier is a segment where it's all about a car that does something just really, really well, but maybe there's a lot of flaws in other things it does. And so, it's not really fair to categorize it against the others, but we do want to highlight a couple of those as well. So in this price range of $100,000 to $150,000, we're dealing with quite a few vehicles. I think I've got most of them. We've got about over 50 cars that we're identifying and talking about. And so we're going to break this into three parts. In this first part, we're going to be covering about 18 vehicles, and then we'll have two more that'll cover about 18 each as well. If you see any cars that we're missing, feel free to leave some notes in the comments. We'll look to potentially include them in a future recording. All right, and here we are going to dive into the tier list. To set the ground rules, we're going to evaluate these cars on a number of factors, starting first with its presence or aesthetics, what I've seen in terms of the driving experience, the track capability of that vehicle, what we've seen in terms of reliability and reliability reputation, and then finally what we think it's going to look like in the future in terms of long-term value. We'll start with the vehicles in alphabetical order, so we'll begin with Acura and we'll make our way down. And generally, I believe I have the models in alphabetical order, but there may be some mixing here and there. So to begin with, we'll talk about great kind of modern classic, the Acura NSX, or specifically, we're going to talk about the Gen 1, but the post-facelift variant. These are selling between $120,000 to $150,000 in today's market. And what we're finding is some of the super low mileage ones are actually going significantly above that as well. But in general, that's the range that you're seeing them. And we're talking about relatively unmolested, unmodified ones. Some of the ones that are getting some mild modifications up to and including like Comptech Supercharger are still holding up well. But the vehicles that you're seeing a lot of just funny modifications on are the ones that tend to be reselling a little bit lower. And this is powered by a 3.0 liter VTEC V6 engine. It's putting out 290 horsepower, 224 foot-pounds of torque, giving you 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds and a 13.1 second quarter mile. Caveat, I also meant to mention, I'm specifically talking about the manual transmission variant. The automatic transmission ones are selling for significantly less than that price range I mentioned. That performance is quick, but it's relatively slow by today's standards. I mean, I think you have some, the Civic Si and like Golf GTI kind of putting up those numbers. But this car is about more than just that raw acceleration. It has a great chassis. The dynamics and the balance is fantastic. It's very easy to live with as well. It's very comfortable. I think overall the aesthetics and the presence, it really holds up well. You know, if you were to tell somebody, hey, this was something that was made in the last 5 to 10 years, they could probably believe you, as opposed to something that was made back in, 2002, 2003-ish. Of note, I do wish, Acura kept evolving this particular chassis, just like kind of how Porsche kept pushing the 911. I think you could have something truly amazing if they did that, but they didn't. Interior, I think, holds up relatively well just because they made it so simplistic on the inside that, yeah, there are some aspects that are very dated and it looks very plain, but it doesn't look dated and plain in a way that draws your attention negatively. I think it's fine and it holds up because it's just so performant and so utilitarian in how it's set up. It works, and it's Acura quality, Honda quality. Track capability is fantastic. These are so agile. The hydraulic steering is so responsive. It feels good. It is very oversteer prone, so do be careful of that lift throttle snap oversteer. I've had some experience with that. But in general, very, very formidable track vehicle, great balance. And then if you do get a Comptech supercharger on there and get it nicely tuned, it's finally putting down the power that you expect out of a platform like this. Reliability-wise, these are good. It's a great Honda Acura product. Of course, we're talking about cars that are over 20 years old now, so all of your rubbers and your seals and stuff like that are deteriorating more likely than not. Honda just can't overcome physics and material properties. So when you get one, especially if it's low mileage, even if it's been well maintained, just look at for those and just know that, hey, look, that's something you got to do. But other than that, it's pretty solid across the board. Long-term value for these, I think these are going up. I think these have been holding up so well. Back in early 2009, 10, you could be picking these up for about $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and now they're double that. And I think they're holding up really well, and I think there's room for them to be going up, especially as they become more rare and become so unique, and they have such a historical presence. So I'm going to put this guy straight up into S tier. We'll start off strong, straight up into S tier. Not the most performance, but so much character, so much history, so much value, and so much quality. It's up there. Next, we'll go to its newer brother, the 2016 to 2022 Acura NSX. Now, there is a Type S, which we won't be talking about. That's selling more close to about the $200K price point. So the normal NSX, they tend to be selling between $100,000 to $150,000 depending on what's being optioned. They're powered by a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6 engine mated to a hybrid system, and that's putting out a combined 573 horsepower, 476 foot-pounds of torque, 3.1 seconds 0 to 60, and 11.2 second quarter mile, so a lot quicker. It's definitely quick, bordering on fast by today's metrics, and I think that's pretty cool. In terms of aesthetics and presence, Acura went for a certain aesthetic. They went for kind of the everyday supercar, and I think they did that well. The only caveat I have against that is it feels like it's a bit of a compromise that doesn't do either extremely well. Like it kind of slides under the radar in a way where at this price point, maybe you want just a little bit more presence. At the same time, it's intriguing enough where you're not like fully just kind of, under the radar, hidden and not attracting attention. So it's just not necessarily doing either well, but it is just so easy to live with. It's easy to get in. The controls are easy to work with. It drives in a way that doesn't feel clunky or high maintenance, and the car doesn't feel high strung. So it's easy to live with. And for that, I think they really hit it out the park. I do think the one knock I do have on the interior is the interior does feel slightly clunky though. Acura does make a decent interior. It's high quality, but it doesn't look very sophisticated. When you compare it against some of the other higher end models, especially in this price point, you see some more elaborate lines. You see a little bit more intricacy in the design. It's a little bit clunky in the Acura, but it's fine. It's functional. Track capability wise, I think these are pretty strong on track. I haven't taken one, but I've taken up in the twisties a little bit. They're pretty agile. They're pretty quick, but it didn't really stir my soul in terms of how it really drove. It felt good, but not special. Again, it kind of fits in that everyday supercar kind of thing, and it maybe does that a little bit too well. Reliability wise, we haven't heard too many crazy things about these cars. And then long-term value wise, these are surprisingly holding up really well. For, again, kind of like what you're getting at this price point against some of the other cars we'll be talking about later down the line, I don't know if the value is there. But there's a strong following for Acura NSX, and that value is holding. And I think that really does boost its overall value in this tier list. I think there is a future where these will continue to do well. I don't know if they're going to climb like I think the older NSX will, though. Overall, look, I think it's a very good car. I think there's a couple compromises on the vehicle, and it's not quite as heavy hitting and punchy as some of the other options we're going to see, but the value is holding so well. I think that pulls it up a little bit. This is solidly in the B tier. I think it's a good car. So that does it for the Acura lineup. Not many cars coming from them that are showing this price point. Aston next. So we'll start with the DB11, the 2017 to 2019 V12 DB11. Now we talked about the DB11 also in the $150,000 to $300,000 price range as well. But we're talking about, maybe like 2021, 22 variants. So these depreciate relatively quickly, and you can definitely get 17 to 19 variants between $90,000 to $150,000, depending on the year and the mileage. They're still powered by that same 5.2 liter V12, putting out 600 horsepower, 516 foot-pounds of torque, 3.9 seconds 0 to 60, and 11.7 second quarter mile. It's a very quick car, very, very athletic Grand Tour. Not exactly a sports car per se, but a very athletic Grand Tour. Presence and aesthetics, I think, again, as my notes in the higher price point, this car looks so good. Aston is really knocking out the ballpark with their overall design and design language. I like it. I like just about every angle on the vehicle. It looks like something that can very much so, one, fit in well at a Cars and Coffee, two, show up to a black tie event, and then three, at least be enjoyable in a weekend romp through the canyons. Across the board, it does a lot of things very well. Driving experience, it kind of hits on that a little bit. The interior materials are all pretty good. I do find that our leather to be a little stiffer than most of the other manufacturers, and so some people may find that slightly uncomfortable. And then the infotainment is kind of last-gen Mercedes, hand-me-down from Mercedes. It works. It's okay. I think the worst part of it is the touch-sensitive sound controls, which are extremely difficult to utilize and very annoying to work with. So a couple of annoyances there in the interior, but other than that, I think it's a great vehicle, great experience. Track-wise, it can be done. It's got the power. It's got a very tight suspension. It feels good. I don't know if anybody has ever taken these outside of a couple of journalists, though. Let's be real. Reliability-wise, look, you're going to have British build reliability issues. I think overall the transmission and some of the major components are hand-me-downs from Mercedes, and you have a little bit better quality, but you have German manufacturing issues from that. We had one where the window switches just kind of died on us for no reason, even though the car only had 4,000 miles on it. And it just kind of is what it is with these cars. But overall, though, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be, where some of the older Astons would have cracked aluminum blocks, and that'd be catastrophe there at that moment. So okay-ish. Long-term value, look, I think these are still depreciating. Astons seem to just depreciate. They don't seem to get as much love on the secondary market as some of the other makes and manufacturers. They just don't have as much of a following that's as sticky and values them as much when they get used. I think that's a shame. I think these are so much car. Look, in the 90 to 110K range for a low mileage variant in good condition, that is all the car for the money. That V12 is so good. That overall experience is so good. The presence is so great. It is all the car for the money. I love it at that price point. At the 140, 150 mark, maybe not. But look, there's only so much more down it can go, and it's just such a unique experience. I'm going to give this A tier. I really like the car right at about the 100K mark. We'll also touch base on its slightly smaller brother, the V8 variant of the same car. That was made between 18 to 22. It's powered by twin turbocharged 4.0 liter V8. I think it's the same V8 that's in the Vantage. I think it's also the same V8 that's in the Mercedes AMG GT. Now in the DB11, it's pumping out 503 horsepower, 497 foot-pounds of torque, 4 second 0 to 60, and a 11.7 second quarter mile. So just a hair slower than the V12. But I do think you're compromising a lot. Overall, what you're doing here on the V8 is you're trading off a year newer for the same price point. That is, a 2017 V12 is selling for about the same price as a 2018 V8. So you get a little bit newer, but I don't know if that's meaningful, especially when you're talking about an Aston Martin that's, looking at 5-6 years old. I think you meaningfully change the experience in a way that doesn't suit the car. For $10,000, either getting the same year for $10,000 more, or get it for the same price, getting a year older version of the car with the V12. I take the V12 every single time. You do have to earmark a little bit more for potential maintenance issues because it's a little more complicated of a powertrain, but that experience difference in terms of the sound, in terms of the feel, the smoothness of that engine and the sound is just so much better than the V12. I just wouldn't even look at the V8 on this platform. The platform is relatively heavy, so I don't know if you're really saving a lot and getting a lot more athleticism out of it for having a slightly lighter power plant. I wouldn't get the V8. Just look at the V12. So overall, just for the power plant change, I'm going to put this guy into C tier. Everything else is about the same, but for the same money, you can get so much better. Then you should just do it. Now, speaking of the other V8 in the lineup, the 2019 to 2023 Aston Martin Vantage. It's powered by that same twin-turbo 4.0 liter V8, which is putting out 503 horsepower and 505 foot-pounds of torque in this format. giving you a 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds and a quarter mile in 12.1 seconds. Kind of interesting. 0 to 60 is a little bit quicker, but the quarter mile is a little bit slower. Maybe that's gearing, maybe that's aero, who knows. Overall though, I think again, Aston's done so good on the aesthetics. I think every angle on this car looks very good, looks very sporty, way more sporty with a bit of elegance as opposed to the DB11's like so much more elegant with a bit of sportiness. This looks so good. I do think it looks a little bit better in some of the brighter colors because of that large front grille that takes up this large space in the front, and it's dark. That on a dark Vantage, the body lines get lost a little bit. So I do like it a little bit more in the brighter colors, but across the board, I like how the front looks. I like how the rear looks. I like the rear wheel arches are so large. It looks beefy and meaty. And then a nice little kind of ducktail spoiler at the very end. It looks very sophisticated and sporty at the same time. Interior-wise, again, a lot of hand-me-down Mercedes components, but I think, a very good treatment. The only knock I have against the interior really here is that it feels like the dash is just so high. Like, again, it's sharing the same platform as the AMG GT. I feel like the sightlines at the AMG GT are a little bit better. At least the way they designed the Vantage. I don't know if it is a thicker or higher dash, but it feels like it when I'm sitting in it in terms of how it looks. Track capability wise, I think these are good. Look, Aston's making a couple variants that are more track focused, like the F1 and the AMR. Overall, I think the base in itself is pretty capable. The AMG GT is very capable on track, so this can do it for sure. And then reliability wise, I think these are okay. Look, they're Astons. We've had some complaints of some electrical issues. Had one customer who bought one, even bought it brand new and took it to Aston for warranty for a number of electrical problems. Just kind of is what it is with these vehicles. So get one that's, had a couple miles on it. All the issues are kind of worked out. I think these should be fine. Long-term value, I think, these are kind of reaching a stable point in terms of where their valuation is. Again, they're selling between, 75 to 180K in today's market. Some of the special editions like the F1s are closer to about like the 150-ish mark, whereas the base ones with some slightly higher mileage are selling closer to the 80, 90K, 100K mark. I think at that price point, it makes a lot of sense. It's a car that at this point is just a hair more expensive than, say, a BMW M3, and I think you're just getting so much more car for your money. It feels so much more sophisticated. It looks so much cooler that, it is a decision. Hey, do you step up from an M3, M4 and just kind of like reach into the Aston, or if you step up from the AMG GT and reach into the Aston? I think the Aston presence is just so wonderful and so great. Overall, at the lower price point, I think it's a great car. Overall, solidly B tier. There's some other options out there that may be a little bit better, but I think a good car across the board. Above or behind the Acura, I like it slightly more than the Acura. That's just my taste. Next, we'll talk about a couple of the older Astons. We'll touch the Vanquish. So this was made in 14 to 18. A couple of variants, Coupe, S-Coupe, Volante, convertible. They're selling between $90,000 to $120,000 today. It's powered by a 6.0 liter V12, 568 horsepower, 465 foot-pounds of torque, 3.6 second 0 to 60, and 11.9 second quarter mile. They're okay. I don't know. I don't feel too strongly about them one way or the other. Presence and aesthetics, it looks good. I think overall Aston design back then was also great. When I look at it, it just feels a little bit long for what it is. It's not quite as bad as like the Rapide, but it does feel a little bit long, but still looks good. Driving experience wise, it's fine. I don't know. The interior was like before, like Aston really kind of leaned into the Mercedes time frame, and it's just not quite as good as the current iterations. Track capability wise, I don't know if anybody's taking these to track. Reliability wise, I think it's fine. I haven't heard too many problems about these, but we haven't run across too many. I really had one. It seemed all right. I looked on the forums, didn't really see, too much outside of the normal complaints about Aston in general. I don't think I came across anything crazy. Long term, I think the problem with these is they're kind of forgotten in the market. Like some people like them and some people do remember them, but in general, in terms of enthusiasts, like, hey, like teenage boy who wants to go buy something cool later on, I don't know if the Vanquish really kind of fits in that model anymore these days. Overall, look, I won't put this into C tier. It's a fine car. I think, if you like it and you find a good one, you shouldn't feel bad about it. It's just, not exactly my taste in terms of vehicles. And now the last Aston of the lineup, we'll look at the DBS, specifically the 2009 to 2012 DBS stick shift. The automatics are going for less money. The stick shifts in this generation are going for about $120,000 to $150,000, depending on the mileage. It's powered by a 6.0 liter V12, putting out 510 horsepower, 420 foot-pounds of torque, 4.3 second 0 to 60, and 12.6 second quarter mile. It's a very cool car. Again, aesthetics-wise, Aston hits it out the park. It looks very cool. This is the James Bond car, and that is just so cool. There's so much character in that. Interior-wise, it's kind of using some Ford parts bin parts, but I do like what they did in keeping it relatively simplistic overall, so that way It doesn't look quite as dated. They have the pop-up nav, which is kind of a little bit weird in today's standards, but it's fine. You kind of keep it down and don't look at it. Use your Google Maps. The one knock I have about it is the shifter is like a little bit funky in terms of just how like thick and crazy large that shift knob is. It's an odd design choice. It's fine, but getting past that though, the driving experience is really cool. Look, you really don't get very many cool stick shift cars anymore. In the V12 on this chassis, it feels great. It feels like a British hot rod across the board. It's really cool. Track capability wise, you could take it on track. I think these are performing well. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to do that. I've taken it up in the twisties. The one knock I have against it is, which was funny, was I was driving this back against the E92 M3, and it surprised me both driving experiences felt very similar, except for the fact that the E92 M3 was like half the price. So that kind of changed my feelings on this a little bit. Reliability wise, this is where Aston still had a lot more problems. Yeah, I think there was even like a Top Gear episode where they were driving these and timing belts just fell off. So do be careful of these a little bit more. Make sure you have a good mechanic. Long-term value, I think these are stable. The stick shifts in particular, they're dying breed. They're going to hold up for collectors. This Aston just looks so good. I think they're going to hold value. I'm not super optimistic about these going up a lot more in value long term, but I think this is something that you can get, you can enjoy, and then you won't be hurt and hit too much in terms of depreciation, if at all. Overall, though, I think, again, there's some other options I might lean into. If you really like the aesthetics, I think this can work. This is something I'm going to drop into C tier. I do like it above the Vanquish and the DB11 V8, but it's going to be C tier vehicle for me. All right, now we're going into Audi. We got the Audi R8 a couple times, but there's a couple different flavors that we're going to be talking about. We'll start with the 2018 Audi R8 Type 4S in the RWS, or rear wheel, I forget what that stands for, rear wheel steering or rear wheel drive variant. These are selling between $130,000 to $150,000. They're powered by a naturally aspirated 5.2 liter V10, which is kind of like the same V10 they have throughout the entire lineup, just detuned slightly in the rear wheel drive variant. Putting out 532 horsepower, 398 foot-pounds of torque, 3.5 second 0 to 60, and 11.6 second quarter mile. I really like what they did here. When they had the update from the Type 42 to the Type 4S, I think it was a really nice update in terms of the interior layout. You have the new Audi MMI system. It feels very kind of driver-oriented. It feels almost like a jet fighter cockpit. The climate control dials are very minimal and very cool in terms of it's really just like 3 knobs with the numbers inside of them. It feels really good. The materials feel good. The outside, I think they did a great job kind of making a little bit more edgy, a little more angular, and looks good. In the RWS, you did have an option to have this like stripe on it, which really helps signify that it is the RWS, which I have 2 thoughts about. Like, partly the R8 is supposed to be, again, like kind of like everyday supercar kind of thing, and it does kind of, fly under the radar a little bit for what it is. In certain communities, it shows up. Here in Los Angeles, it kind of blends in the background. But you put that stripe on there and it's like, hey, everybody look at me. So some people might like that. Some people might not. It might feel a little bit too flamboyant or ostentatious on this vehicle. I'm torn on terms of how I like that stripe or not. Driving experience wise, I love the R8 platform, love the chassis. The all-wheel drive variant kind of understeers a little bit when pushed. The rear-wheel drive, I think you get to oversteer a little bit more. Track capability, people have taken these on track. They're great. The dual clutch transmission is great. The engine is great. I can't say enough good things about this car. Overall reliability is pretty good as well. I haven't heard too many crazy things about these cars. Like, just expect kind of your modern problems that you expect, but nothing too crazy. And long-term value, I think these are holding up well. Again, I don't know if these are necessarily going to be like a collector edition later on. I don't know if these are necessarily going to be sought after, but they're holding up well. I think they've been in this price range for a while now, and I reasonably believe they'll stay in this price range for a while. So you get one, you can enjoy it a little bit. You're not too worried about it. Overall, this is a nice solid B tier. I'll put this above the Aston. I like the Audi R8s. Next, we'll talk about kind of its older brother, the 2014 to 2015 variant of the Audi R8. We're talking specifically about the S-Tronic transmission variants, because the R-Tronic single clutch is just really bad. But we're talking about the S-Tronic V10, V10 Plus. We're not talking about stick shift, because stick shift variant of the V10, V10 Plus, those are selling in the $150,000 to $200,000 range plus, depending on the mileage and such. They're super collectible. We're talking about the automatic versions. These are selling between $100,000 to $150,000, powered by 5.2 liter V10. Again, same engine, 550 horsepower in this variation, 398 foot-pounds of torque. I think there's a little bit more on the plus. 0 to 60 in about 3.3 seconds and 11.3 in the quarter mile. A very quick car. The body lines here are a little bit more round, and I like that a lot as well. I do think I like the slightly modern design language a little bit more, but I do like just kind of how cool and flowy the R8 is in this time period. The interior, though, is using the older Audi MMI, which is like It's so clunky. It's the same version they were using since like 2008 and older, and you got to have a little dongle to even plug in your Bluetooth phone and all this kind of stuff. So there's some, annoyances there, but it's fine. Otherwise, it's functional. Driving dynamics are great. It handles well, goes great on track, slight understeer. Overall reliability is great. Haven't heard too many major issues with these vehicles. Now you are getting into a car that's getting to be slightly older, so do check shocks, do check some of the gaskets, the rubber components, and that kind of stuff may need getting repaired or replaced. And then long-term value, I think these are holding up well. Again, they seem to be have been trading in this range in the low 100s for a while, and it looks like they aren't really kind of going up or down. I think they're still well desired, but they're not exactly kind of an iconic collector car. Overall, they drive well. They're a great everyday supercar. I think you can get one of these and just enjoy it day in, day out, and not be too worried about it. Overall, solidly B tier. I'll put this towards the end of B tier, though. I do think some of the other cars are a little bit cooler and more exciting. And then the last one, it looks exactly like the other one, but specifically, I want to highlight the V8 manual variant of the Type 42 R8. Now, these are selling between $100,000 to $140,000, powered by a 4.2 liter V8, putting out 430 horsepower, 317 foot-pound of torque, 4.2 second 0 to 60, and 12.8 second quarter mile. So definitely a lot slower what it is, but what you're highlighting here is not the engine. You're losing a little bit of that iconic sound and feel by leaving out the V10, and that's why there's such a price disparity versus the V10 manuals. But the manual transmission itself is just so unique in this car. You really don't get it on anything else. Like, you pretty much stop seeing these, and what we're talking about is that gated shifter. You pretty much stopped seeing these by the time the Audi R8 came out. That, like, nobody else, I think, really had the gated shifter anymore. Ferrari used to have them. They stopped doing it. Audi really had the only gated shifter at the time. And it's not the quickest shifting manual transmission. It doesn't feel as quick as like the Porsche GT3 transmission, how easily and quickly you can kind of bang it into various gears and how precise it is. Not even quite as quick, I feel like, as the S2000 transmission. Honda just does such a good job there. But what it is it is just so dang cool. It feels like you're slamming home a bolt action rifle. Every time you're changing gears, you're going bang, and you hear that chunk from the metal on metal contact and the metal linkage moving around, and you go chunk again. It is a unique experience that you can't replicate anywhere else. And I think that's why the cost of entry is just so high on this car. It really makes it special. Track-wise, like, you can take it on. You got 3 pedals. It makes it very engaging. You're not going to probably put on as quick of a lap time as some of the other cars out there, but it is very engaging, very rewarding to drive, and I've heard everything's pretty stout on it, so I think it'll be fine. You get a little bit more of an agile vehicle with the V8 because you have a little bit less weight, but you have a little bit less thrust than the V10 because you have less horsepower. Reliability seems fine. And then long-term value, I think these are holding well with some room for maybe appreciation, because I think the manual aspect of it is really making these special for collectors and enthusiasts and who want that kind of experience. So we'll kind of have to keep an eye on that. Overall, I think this is B tier. I'm going to put this solidly in the middle of B tier. I think it's very cool in terms of what it offers. All right, and then we'll close out with 2 other cars on the Audi lineup, the RS6 wagon and RS7 sedan. Now, these are selling between $90,000 to $140,000 depending on the year and the mileages that you're dealing with. We're talking about specifically about like 2021 to 2024 model years. They're powered by the same twin-turbo 4.0 liter V8, putting out 591 horsepower, 590 foot-pounds of torque, giving you a 0 to 60 somewhere between, like, in the 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 range, and quarter mile right about like 11.5 seconds. Very quick cars. They have a very modern Audi aesthetic to them. Overall, exterior-wise, I think they look very sporty. I think Audi's really trying to go for that sporty look over Mercedes and BMW. And the interior, I think it's well done. The leather quality seems to be pretty good. The Audi MMI, with their setup is, I think, a little bit more, I don't know what's the right word for it, maybe sporty, more looking to it than maybe the BMW interior seems a little bit more kind of executive professional type, whereas the Mercedes interior seems very luxurious. A little more sporty-ish is kind of the angle they're going for. It works across the board. I like it. I would say the driving experience on both of these, it feels a little bit heavy. Audi tend to be a little bit heavy. It drives a little bit heavier. I do think there is a lot more coolness in the wagon because it's just so unique. And, I'm a dad. It's like the ultimate dad vehicle there to have the wagon in terms of what it looks like, how it drives, how it handles. The RS7 sedan feels a little generic. I think there are a couple of other sedans that offer a little bit more luxury or a little bit more sportiness in a way that the RS7 feels compromised. It tries to do a little bit both, but doesn't do it quite as well on both avenues. And so it kind of like, it's just like meh. Whereas the the wagon is just so unique in how it looks and where it sits in the market. That's kind of cool in its own right there. Reliability is fine across the board. Small annoyances with electronics here and there. I think the Audi sensors right now are running into a lot of issues with software update kind of a thing, but you always get a lot of these sensors not detected kind of warnings and that kind of random stuff with some electronics. It happens with these. Long-term values, they seem to be falling a little bit. The RS7 in particular, I think will depreciate longer term. So if you get one of those, it's just going to fall in low value. The RS6 wagon though has a bit of an enthusiast following. I don't think the production numbers are super high. So there's an opportunity for that to really kind of hold value a little bit more long-term. And that's kind of how I would see them going. So overall, I'm going to put the wagon into the B tier. I think it's going to hold value, a little bit better value. I think it's a little bit cooler, and it'd be the one I would pick of them. I'd pick it over the Acura NSX. If I had my would you rathers, I would pick the NSX. And then the RS7, I'm gonna put this guy into C tier. I'll put this somewhere in the middle. It's a fine car. It's kind of like, again, against the other kind of sports sedans out there, it kind of blends in the background. We'll talk about some of those other sports sedans right now. We're looking at the BMW lineup, specifically the G80 M3 and the G82 M4, and we're looking at the CS and the CSL. All right, so these are selling between $110,000 to $130,000. That's a bit of a drop from the starting MSRP at about $150,000, and they're being powered by a 3.0 liter inline six engine, putting out 543 horsepower, 479 foot-pounds of torque, and then getting you 0-60 somewhere around 3.5 seconds, and a quarter mile somewhere around 11 seconds. I think it's a little bit quicker in the CSL than the CS. But it's about the same. Overall presence and aesthetics, actually really like design language. At first when it came out with that giant weird kidney grill evolution, I didn't really like it, but the more I saw it, the more it kind of grew on me, and I get what BMW need to do to kind of really set itself apart out there. I think it worked better on light colors like whites and yellows and or bright colors like reds and maybe blues. I think it gets a little bit lost when you have like a dark gray or black. It just becomes like this nebulous black mass. So I'm a little bit less of a fan of it in that type of a color. But overall design language, I'm very fine with. Interior is very professional. It maintains that BMW kind of like professional luxury aesthetic. And it works. I like the infotainment, the giant screens going on both sides. They're functional. It does take a little bit getting used to in terms of the menus and the sub menus, but once you get used to it, it's actually like you get what they're trying to do. It works pretty well. The shortcuts are there. I'm pretty happy with it. The steering wheel is really cool with all the buttons that you get and the M button options. There's a lot of cool like features about the car. I will say though, I hate the seats. I'm not gonna lie. I hate the seats on both of these cars. I hate the carbon fiber buckets and I hate the kind of carbon fiber sport seat. I don't know, something about how the side bolsters, the hip bolsters kind of are set and how rigid they are. They really bite into my legs, and I'm not a very tall or wide guy. So I expect other people might have the same issue. I don't have that issue in any of the other buckets, not in the Porsche GT3 buckets, not in the Ferrari Gold Rake seats, even the Lamborghini buckets that everybody else hates, or McLaren Senna seats. Never have that issue. In this, though, it is just very uncomfortable. After like 10 minutes of driving, I'm not happy. It may work for somebody else. My business partner says they're fine, and he's like 6'2", and I don't know, it's weird. Otherwise, I will actually say I like the M3 a little bit more. I think the M3 CS sits in this unique spot where there are not a lot of like really sporty competitors that have like a really sporty athletic four-door vehicle or four-door entrant in there that has a very good tight suspension, has a very sporty sounding engine, has overall very sporty feel to it. I mean, there's a couple other four-door cars coming from Dodge, but they're not like the same. And then the Mercedes, they feel a little too luxury versus sporty. I think BMW has a great niche with the G80 M3. The M4 though, I do have some concerns on it in terms of like, well, partly these are getting so heavy. It's kind of crazy. Like the 4 doors, I can kind of accept them being a little heavy, but the 2-door CSL, even after the weight savings, is still close to 4,000 pounds, I think, or something like that, which is like, wow, that's a lot of mass. I don't think it harkens back to the E46 M3 CSL coolness, like back when the E46 was like losing weight because you're using cardboard for the trunk material and you're setting Nürburgring lap records. That was cool. That was so cool. This CSL feels like, hey, look, we took out the back seats, we threw in these uncomfortable seats, and then we tuned the engine up a little bit with a little bit of code, and here you go. It doesn't feel like they tried all that hard on it. I'm not as enthused about it. Track capability wise, I think these are both very capable. You can do the BMW drifting on it. On the 4-door, it might work out because like, hey, like that's your compromise car. You can go to work in it and then you can take that to the track. That's fine. The 2-door though, I will have a little bit of pushback on that car because at this price point, why aren't you getting the Aston Martin Vantage? And why aren't you getting a 911? Overall, though, I think long-term, these are going to kind of depreciate a little bit. I don't know if they're going to be collector items. I do think the M3 is going to hold a little bit better than M4 just because of the unique location in the market of where the M3 sits and who it's competing against. Overall, I'm going to put the M3 into B tier. With all that said, I think it's still a fine car. It just wouldn't be a car that I'd necessarily get, but it's a fine car. Put it right somewhere in the middle there. I do like it above the Audi product. And then the M4, this is going to be C tier for me. I'm going to still put it above the Audi, but it's going to go in the middle of it somewhere. All right, and then last two on the BMW side, we'll talk about the 2022 M5 CS. I think these were selling between like $140,000 to $150,000, and then the 23 to 24 M8. These are selling between like $90,000 to $130,000. Both powered by 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, putting about 627 horsepower and 453 foot-pounds of torque in the M5, and 617 horsepower and 553 foot-pounds of torque in the M8. They are fast appreciators. Let's see what all these cars are, and I'll talk about that in a second. Presence and aesthetics, they look good. They look like professional sports sedans. They deliver what you expect out of from BMW for what these vehicles are. They don't look particularly sporty, but they're a big sedan that looks sportier, and it fits exactly that. Interior-wise, has that same BMW design language for like sporty professional, if you will. Driving experience, they drive well, they drive comfortably. It's basically like a Mercedes S-Class, but like dialing up the sportiness ever so slightly. Track capability-wise, I don't know if you're going to take these to the track. They're going to be a little bit heavy for it. It's possible BMW markets it this way. I mean, one of these pictures has the BMW on the racetrack. You can do it, but I feel like if you're spending this much, you probably have some money to get an S2000, and you should take that to the track. These aren't naturally there. And I think that's my issue with it. It's kind of like really getting something that is sporty and trying to get it overly sporty in a way that doesn't really fit what that car really needs to do. And I think that's partly why these are depreciating so much. People aren't really like drawn to them. Some people buy them new and they get hit by that depreciation, but the secondary market, when people are like thinking about these again, they're not really kind of leaning into these. They're paying almost the same price for M3s and M4s, which should tell you something. Overall, these are both going to go into D tier. I think they're fine for the right buyer. Don't let me dissuade you if you like the car. I just don't necessarily see the value in it for myself. I feel like if I were to get into this class of car, I'd probably look at more like a Mercedes S-Class or something like that. And then the last two-part vehicle to talk about for this particular segment, for part one, we'll hit up the Chevrolet Corvettes. We'll start with the 2019 C7 Corvette ZR1. Now, we talked about the ZR1 stick shift with the ZTK and 3LZ trim of the ZTK track package. And those are selling about like at $180,000 to $200,000 and more, depending on the mileage. Like some of them are going for as high as $225,000, $230,000 still, and they seem to be holding up well. The automatics are going to take a hit in value. These seem to be selling between $120,000 to $150,000, depending on mileage and condition, but still powered by that same 6.2 liter LT5 supercharged V8, putting out a massive 755 horsepower, 715 foot-pounds of torque, 2.9 second 0 to 60 and 10.6 second quarter mile. Overall presence still holds up well. It's a 5-year-old car now, but I think it still looks really cool. If they just dropped it today, you'd be fine with it as long as they updated the infotainment. If they told you, hey, look, this is a 2024, 2025 car, I'd believe it. Just updating infotainment a little bit. I think it holds up really well. The interior is really nice. I actually like it more than the C8 interior because it's a little bit more open. I do feel like the C8 is a little claustrophobic, and I'll touch base on that in a second. But it's functional. Everything works in this car. The driving experience, I mean, it's athletic. Everybody thinks these are just like straight line hot rods, or some people do at least, but like Corvette has been doing so much in terms of creating a track capable vehicle ever since the C5. Those are known to be great track vehicles. The C6, great vehicles. The C7s continue being great vehicles, setting Nürburgring records and competing against cars 3, 4, 5 times the price. Well, now maybe not so much of this price multiple because these are holding value so well. Overall, very, very capable car. When you drive it, you're just like shooting eagles out the rear. This is just pure America, and it's the last of a breed. I think if you don't necessarily have to have the stick shift experience, like this is a very good car. Overall, I think the values are holding. I don't know if there's as much upside on these as the stick shifts, so do be aware of that. I do think the stick shift variants will continue to go up because they're such a unique collector type of vehicle. The non-stick shift ones, even with the ZTK, I think they're going to hold well, but they're not necessarily going to go up quite the same. Touch on reliability. I've been hearing these are fine. And I think what's nice about them is they're American vehicles where replacement parts are generally pretty cheap compared to the European counterparts. So if something goes wrong, it's relatively easy to work on. So with all that said, I'm gonna put this into B tier. I'm gonna put this on the upper end of B tier. It's not quite an A or S just because of where I think the long-term value is gonna go on this car. But across the board, there's a lot that I do like about it. And now the last car I'm gonna touch base on in this part is the 2023 to present C8 Corvette Z06. Now, again, we touched base on this in the 150 to 300K price range, but there specifically, I was talking about the variants that were coming with the Z07 Ultimate Track Performance package. Those seem to be selling just north of 150, about like 160, 170-ish, even in today's market. With the variants that don't have that package, you're generally seeing them between $100,000 to $160,000, depending on the options on there, whether you have the carbon ceramics, whether you have the front axle lift, a couple of other things kind of going in there. It's still powered by that same 5.5 liter naturally aspirated V8. That's a flat plane crank engine. And it's putting out an insane 670 horsepower for a naturally aspirated engine, 460 foot-pounds of torque, 2.6 second 0 to 60 in 10.6 second quarter mile. Now, actually, a big difference between this and my experience with the ones with the Z07 Ultimate Performance package is my issue with the Z07 is it's a lot more money, especially if you option the carbon fiber wheels, which I think are silly for this type of car. Two, I don't know if it like adds enough aero to really feel like it's worth the extra money. Like when you go from a GT3 to GT3 RS, Porsche now adds so much crazy aero. You feel like Porsche is not holding back. Like they went all out to get the aero. On the Z06, even when you option the Z07 Ultimate Performance package, I feel like Corvette's holding back a little bit because they want to leave room for the ZR1. And I'm a little disappointed in that. Like the Z06 should be everything you give to the naturally aspirated version of this platform. Just give it all, and then, the ZR1 is going to have 1,000+ horsepower with its supercharged engine, but like for us track enthusiasts who want the naturally aspirated engine with just all the aero, give it to us. But they're holding back, and I didn't like that. On top of, with the way the suspension's set up and the tire selection, what I noticed on the Z06, Z07 is that it trams lines like absolute crazy. If you take your hands off the wheel, you're going to get thrown off the road, because it's following every single rut. Without that, it actually drives really well. It drives so well. It drives just like the normal Corvette. It feels easy. It goes straight on the normal road. At the same time, I don't know if you're losing that much performance. Like you take it up in the twisties, you really don't feel much of a difference in performance. These tires are still very sticky. It's still a very good suspension setup. It's still a very, very good chassis, well balanced across the board. If you're going like, 7/10, 8/10, I don't think you're going to notice a dang difference. At the same time, all of a sudden, livability and drivability is just that much better at a much better price point. So with all that said, I like this car a lot more actually without the Z07 Ultimate Performance package. It's just crazy because everything else, I'm like, give me everything. But on this one, I'd actually stay away from that. And with that in mind, I'd save the money. I'd get one in the lower 100s. And I'm going to stick this guy solidly into S tier. This is an S tier car. The question is it above the NSX or behind the NSX? Look, long-term value-wise, Chevrolet's going to make as many of these Corvettes as they can, and that's going to kill the long-term value. And that's a shame because this is a very special car. I get it. Look, Chevrolet's going to make their money. And so the NSX wins out on that. But the Z06 just drives so good. Value aside, I'd pick the Z06. And that's where I'm going to land it right now. And that's how we're going to end part one of our three-part series on the vehicles in the $100,000 to $150,000 price range. I know I'm going over a little bit. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot that we've seen. There's a lot of cars to go over. So stay tuned for the next part next week as we go through from Dodge all the way down to partway through Mercedes. And then last part, we'll be finishing up Mercedes and going all the way, through the rest of the lineup all the way down to Shelby. So thanks for watching our video. Hopefully this was insightful and engaging for you. As I said, this is part one of 3, and we have quite a few more vehicles to cover. Please tune in next week for part 2.